Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another exciting episode of Turbo Warning Radio. I am your host, the Kaiju Conservative. So it's not often that I read something in the fake news, even in the fake news media, that gets my blood up and just really pisses me the hell off. I mean, despite all appearances, I'm not generally an excitable person. But every time I go to the Bulwark, that website, that bastion of never Trump idiocy, the last, supposedly the last hope for conservatism in Trump's America, everything I read from there just pisses me the hell off. Case in point, the latest article that the editor-in-chief of the Bulwark, Charlie Sykes, severely conservative, and he will tell you just how severely conservative he is as soon as the cruise ships start operating again, and he can go ahead and book another one of his Bulwark cruises with all of his conservative luminaries like Bill Kristol and Joe Walsh and Rick Wilson and so on and so forth. Ahoy there, sailor. Anyway, Charlie Sykes has been pimping this article for the last day, that says COVID-19 is this generation's Vietnam. And with a title like that, it's gonna be a doozy. You can tell that this tweet that he posted Tuesday morning has not been well received. It's been ratioed pretty hard. 1,400 replies, 250 likes. For anybody who's not well versed in Twitter, that's a bad thing. It means people don't like you. People do not agree with your tweet, and they don't like they're not picking up what you're selling. So let's just go ahead without further ado. I'm not going to go ahead and go into the entire article. I do want to hit a couple of key points here with it, and I'm not even going to put a link to this article in the comment section below. It's that stupid. I will put an archive link in the comment section below if you want to go ahead and take a look at that on your own time. And I will warn you though, you're going to want the 5 minutes of your life back that it takes to read this. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at why COVID-19 is this generation's Vietnam. So interesting. Not. By Jonathan Last. So that's an appropriate last name. The byline says, in 6 weeks, the coronavirus has killed more Americans than the Vietnam War. That is essentially the only comparison between the two. Well, that and the Chinese coronavirus and Vietnam, they're both started by communists. That's another comparison. So there's two comparisons between the two events. So the article starts out, on June 8th, 1956, Technical Sergeant Richard B. Fitzgibbon Jr. was shot in cold blood outside a U.S. base in South Vietnam by a fellow airman. He would become the first American military death in the conflict that was not yet thought of by his countrymen as the Vietnam War. On May 15th, 1975, Private Kelton R. Turner, an 18-year-old Marine, became the final definitively known American casualty, blah, 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 blah. In between these 2 days, a span of almost 19 years, 58,318 Americans were killed in the Vietnam War. On February 6, 2020, an unidentified resident of California's Santa Clara County became the first American to die of the coronavirus, or at least that is what we think right now. Subsequent testing may reveal that COVID-19 was responsible for some other U.S. death a few days or even weeks or months, like a lot of people suspect, before then, but let's assume the February 6th start date. At some point, either today or tomorrow, another unidentified person will become the 58,319th American officially to have died of COVID-19, meaning that the coronavirus has killed more Americans in 12 weeks than the Vietnam War killed in 19 years. So what? I hear this statistic cited all the time by the left and never Trumpers, but I repeat myself. So what? More Americans die every year than were killed in the Vietnam War through various causes. Sometimes we have a flu season that kills almost or more Americans than died in the Vietnam War. We're not really sure. We've had a couple of years where we've had really, really bad flu seasons. In fact, the CDC estimates between 20,000 and 60,000 Americans die per year due to the flu. That's potentially more Americans than were killed in Vietnam, and you don't see Mr. Last bitching about that. No, you only see Mr. Last bitching about the Chinese coronavirus. Why? Because President Trump's in charge. That's why. And in fact, this entire article can be summed up with one sentence. The TLDR, too long didn't read version of this article is, if Trump had done things differently, things would be better. That's it. That is the entire, and this is a long article, by the way. It is a long article. And it says a whole hell of a lot of nothing and can be summed up in exactly one sentence. Now, I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to go through this entire article here. He spends the first half of the article comparing the coronavirus pandemic to the Vietnam War, telling you how the two are alike. And then he gets down here about halfway through the article and... let's see, where is it? Here we go. This little paragraph right here. A pandemic is not a war, but there are parallels between what happened in Vietnam and America's experience of the coronavirus. Yeah, and essentially it hinges on the fact that leadership in both incidents made some pretty bad decisions. And there's actually 3 points that I wanted to address. I think it's 3. I'm not. This whole article has got me so. It's got me so flummoxed I can't think straight sometimes. But there's a couple of different points that I wanted to discuss here, and it all hinges on is essentially spouting off the same mainstream media lies that the left has been spouting off for the last couple of weeks. The first point that I want to address here is where Mr. Last says the president could have banned all travel from China after the outbreak in Wuhan, despite what he now claims he did not. And that's true. There were probably about, I think, between 40 and 60,000 people that still came into the country from China after President Trump's travel ban. Those were American citizens coming back to repatriate, and I believe some of them were also legal immigrants as well, green card holders, permanent residents coming back home. And we don't, and you hear the left cite this statistic repeatedly. The left would want us to completely abandon these American citizens to the horrors that happened in Wuhan. They would want us to abandon our people, say, well, nope, sorry, screw you guys. We're not going to have you coming in here and being plague zombies. So yeah, that's the first point of attack that Mr. Last, halfway through the article, by the way, goes after President Trump for. He says the administration could have taken a hard line with the Chinese government and insisted on embedding American researchers with the Chinese teams in order to get an unfiltered view of the facts on the ground. Instead, the president took the word of China's authoritarian leader and repeated Chinese propaganda. Yeah. That's a good point. You know who else was repeating Chinese propaganda? The World Health Organization, the agency that was supposed to be coordinating the world's response to the pandemic and helping to save lives. Back in January 29th, I believe was the date. The World Health Organization essentially repeated the Communist Party line that there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission with coronavirus, when there point blank was human-to-human transmission with coronavirus. President Trump also attempted to send the CDC into Wuhan in order to help the Chinese and gather information. The Chinese refused that. Hell, the Chinese refused to even let the WHO in for the first couple of months, a couple of weeks, I believe, from the start of the pandemic. China didn't give anybody any information. They blatantly lied to the world about the extent of the outbreak and the nature of the disease in Wuhan, and the World Health Organization parroted it. They lapped it up. They accepted it at face value. They went ahead and they disseminated it to the masses. That's what the World Health Organization did with Chinese propaganda. And you know what? Democrats were right there with them, because you had Nancy Pelosi back in late February, telling people, "Come on down to Chinatown. There's no danger here from this virus. It's safe. It's perfectly fine." You had Bill de Blasio as well, telling people to keep living their normal lives, keep doing what they're doing. Essentially, Mr. Last points out the mote in President Trump's eye without picking out the massive freaking honking log in his side's eye. And then the last point that he talks about that really bears any sort of mention is the fact that he says the government could have stockpiled essential medical supplies and built a robust testing system during the period between the Wuhan outbreak and the arrival of the virus on America's shores. It did not. Maybe you should talk to the Democrat governors that were busy selling off their medical supplies to the highest bidder. Andrew Cuomo, New York. Why don't we talk about California as well? Gavin Newsom, I believe, did the exact same thing. They actually California had a pretty robust public health system that Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger helped put into place. I believe around the time of the first SARS outbreak, I want to say, maybe a year or two after that happened. He actually had a fairly robust medical system in place that probably could have dealt with the outbreak very handily, and that was just gradually dismantled over the years and forgotten about by Democrat leadership. So instead of, blasting President Trump for not stockpiling these things, why don't we maybe ask that same question of the governors that are supposed to be in charge of these things on the state level? Is that maybe not a valid point? And then and then the last thing, the last point that I just remembered this was essentially, there's this big paragraph here and then another paragraph here where Last essentially accuses President Trump of lying to the American public and deceiving them about the extent of the outbreak because he said it's going to disappear one day like a miracle. Number one, that quote is taken out of context, but number two, President Trump was not deceiving the American public. He wasn't lying to the American public. Again, I'll reference you to Mayor Bill de Blasio and Nancy Pelosi, among others, who were saying that it was all fine. It was perfectly safe. Nothing was going to happen. This was even after President Trump banned travel from China, by the way. This was after we started realizing the extent of the absolute fuckery that was going on in Wuhan, the extent of how dangerous this virus really was. We were just starting to come into our own knowledge of how this could potentially be a really bad situation. And you had Democrats parading around the country saying, no, there's nothing here. It's fine. It's come on down to Chinatown, party, go to school, go to work, do what you normally do, go to the park. It's all good. It's all gravy, people. Maybe Mr. Last should take the Democrats to account for that. Of course, Mr. Last is not going to do that because he's a never Trumper. He's a writer for the Bulwark, and attacks on Democrats don't generate the clicks, especially not when you're trying to impress your newfound leftist friends. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and leave this video right here for now. It's already gone on a lot longer than I wanted to spend on this. It's just, like I said, the Bulwark is it's a font of such idiocy that it every time I go there, it sets me off. I need to stop going there. Of course, it does make for some good videos, so who knows? Anyway, like I said, I'm going to put an archive link to this story in the comment section below, so you can go ahead and take a look at that at your leisure without having to worry about giving the Bulwark any clicks or anything like that. Let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. As always, if you liked what you heard, leave a like and subscribe to my channel. Both those things help me out quite a bit, and I will see you all next time.